Good evening. After a two-day manhunt, 2 sleepless nights, law enforcement have apprehended Vance Bolter. That's 48 hours that law enforcement involved in a complex and dangerous...
Walz. I don't know who thought he was a good idea. He was like a second iteration of Tim Kaine, but even worse. He turned out to be
Picture this. Tim Walz thinks he's playing chess, but Lindi Li just flipped the board, stole the queen, and is now juggling the pawns while sipping tea. This isn't politics anymore, it's a roast, an unraveling, and a plot twist that not even Netflix could script. If you thought Walz had secrets locked tighter than Fort Knox, think again, because Lindi Li brought the keys, the flashlight, and the popcorn. Buckle up.
Decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us.
He was trafficking in lies and conspiracies. He said that he never supported a national abortion ban. We have in writing a screenshot from his website wherein he supported a national abortion ban. So he was just lying.
Please subscribe to the channel, it helps more than you think. Tim Walz was cruising into 2025, thinking his carefully ironed Midwestern nice image was untouchable. Like the political version of comfort food, bland but dependable. Then along came Lindi Li, who didn't bother tapping politely on his polished image. She bulldozed straight through it with sarcasm sharp enough to slice cheddar. Suddenly, the governor's spotless reputation looked less like a warm casserole and more like leftovers forgotten in the fridge. Questionable, and smelling worse the longer it sat in the open.
Possibly think it would be a good idea to lie about being in Tiananmen Square when you were in Nebraska. I mean, come on, it's just so beyond the pale. And now he's thinking about running for president. Didn't he get the memo that the American people do not want a second coming of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz? And Kamala is in California considering a run for governor. We do not want any more DEI, woke, any of that. We just don't. We're done with the woke and trans.
Walz's entire persona has been one big branding exercise. The calm, steady, practical leader who assures you everything is fine while the house smolders behind him. He's the guy who'd smile, pat you on the shoulder, and say, "Don't worry, I've got this under control," even as your Wi-Fi dies, the fridge breaks, and a raccoon sets fire to your garage. Folksy reassurance on the outside, chaos bubbling underneath. That's exactly the image Lindi Li just tore apart, leaving
out of bounds. And how soon was it after the election? Like
a week or two. When it wasn't at that point. I was just asking questions. Like it wasn't even. I was like, what happened to the $2.5 billion we raised? Why did we spend it on Beyonce? Why did we spend 2.5? Why did we spend millions of dollars on Oprah? Like legitimate questions that needed to be answered. But the amount of hate I got for that was just overwhelming. And the final straw, the moment that I knew this to leave, was actually around Christmas.
To understand the roast, you've got to understand the costume. Walz built his identity like a political IKEA shelf. Plain wood, functional, sturdy enough to hold some family photos. But look too closely and the whole thing wobbles. He's the teacher turned politician, the neighbor you'd trust to water your plants, and the dad joke guy who also commands the National Guard. On paper, it sounds perfect. In practice, it's the kind of branding that works until someone points out the screws don't match. The wood is particle board, and you overpaid by at least $200. That someone, in this...
And the biggest tell of the evening was when he told the moderators, well, I thought the rules stipulated, or something to the effect of the rules were saying that you weren't going to fact check. And you talked about own goals. That was an own goal. That said everything.
But
so
Lindi,
he was counting on the fact that no one was going to push back.
Are you frustrated then that Walz didn't make the argument that you're making to me right now?
I think he did a really good job tonight. And we had a live focus group.
And basically asked, "Nice mask, what's under it?" And suddenly, the receipts started flying. While Walz has presented himself as a calm hand on the wheel, the car has swerved more times than a teenager learning to drive stick. His co-policies were a masterclass in indecision. Shut it down, open it up, lock it again, then shrug when everyone's confused. The governor sold himself as pragmatic, but his version of pragmatism was like flipping a coin and pretending it was strategy. And crime. Let's not even start. Walz tried to balance progressive calls for reform with the demand for law and order, leaving him looking like a guy trying to dance on 2 different boats. Spoiler, you can't, you just end up wet. While he peddled talking points, the headlines told a different story. one that didn't fit neatly into his steady leadership bedtime narrative. The best part of Lindi's takedown is that she doesn't stop at contradictions. She adds spicy sarcasm, exposing hypocrisy you can't unsee. Walz claiming the moral high ground while cozying up to party insiders, so tightly he might as well be furniture at DC cocktail hours. He markets himself as grassroots, but you'd need a telescope to see those roots buried under
rating of the night when he pointed out that Trump completely failed on the border. He didn't deliver on the border wall that he promised. He blew up the border deal that we have, border as a campaign issue. So he scored really highly also when he mentioned Matthew 25 and how his faith guides and inspires his empathy for people, a quality that Trump and Vance so abundantly lack.
Lindi didn't just poke holes in Walz's narrative sheet, practically turned it into Swiss cheese, reminding everyone that polishing your medals doesn't erase the messy choices you made as governor. What makes this sting isn't just that the walls look inconsistent. The everyman teacher persona starts to feel less like authenticity and more like costume design, like discovering the quirky indie band you loved for their raw talent was actually manufactured in a boardroom to appeal to suburban parents who shop at Target. That's Walz, the Target brand candidate, with him stepping into the national spotlight as Harris's VP pick. The magnifying glass has gone from optional accessory to burning laser beam, turning every flaw that was easy to shrug off in Minnesota into a national talking point. And here comes Lindi Li, waving a neon sign that says, "Y'all seeing this?" If Walz hoped to coast on his cardigan charm, those days are over. Lindi didn't just present information, she made it sting. And nothing sticks harder in politics than a well-aimed sting. Now the fallout begins. Walz's team faces the awkward choice of ignoring it and hoping it dies down, or addressing it and risking amplification. Ignoring Lindi is like ignoring a fire alarm. You can pretend it's not happening, but everyone else is still evacuating.
Doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make.
It is even trickier, because stepping into her arena means facing sarcasm as a sword while you're already bleeding. But this isn't just about Walz. That's the kicker, it's about an entire system built on image management. And Walz just happens to be the latest face caught mid-costume change. Lindi Li is the commentator gleefully pointing out that the emperor's new clothes don't fit, which is why this hits harder than your average political critique. One viral roast can open the floodgates. Journalists, rivals, and armchair critics are now scrutinizing Walz's record with a magnifying glass. Because once someone says, "Hey, there's a crack in that foundation," everyone wants to poke it and see how deep it goes. That's the power of exposure. It doesn't end with one post, one tweet, or one segment. It snowballs. Meanwhile, Walz tries to present himself as the steady co-pilot for Harris's White House run, while the internet buzzes with jokes about how his steady hand looks more like it's shaking a martini in an earthquake. Lindi Li lit the match, and now the question is, how big will the fire get? The beauty of political exposure is watching spin doctors scramble like contestants on a cooking show who just realized they forgot to preheat the oven.
Very first answer that he gave, let's just remind ourselves, he sort of stumbled through. Right now the crisis in the Middle East is, front and center of the global news agenda, and we would expect maybe that someone who was running to be the vice president would have more confidence. Let's remind ourselves of what happened.
October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Walz's team now faces a tough choice. Double down on the cardigan charm, or pretend none of this is happening. Spoiler, neither works. When Lindi Li roasts you, it's not a debate, it's a barbecue, and the smoke lingers. The first line of defense is always claiming out of context. But these days, everything is out of context. Walz could trip over a garden hose, and someone would argue the footage missed the angle, proving it was an inspiring leap. Once people spot the pattern, no number of statements can stitch it back together. Media reaction is predictably split. Some outlets treat Walz like the lovable Midwestern uncle who brings a hot dish to the potluck, reporting Lindi's takedown as just another spicy tweet to chuckle at before moving on. Others, however, smell blood, and nothing sells like blood in politics. Suddenly, Walz's past decisions, Those little compromises and contradictory stances become headline material. Footnotes from state-level coverage are now national news, plastered on tyrants with dramatic music worthy of a true crime documentary.
And when he gave that answer, Lindy,
Well, as I mentioned before, J.D. Vance went to Yale Law School. He is seasoned, and I said this in the previous interview. This is what he does. He's slick and he's sharp, but Walz is a fundamentally good guy. And our focus group of battleground voters, mind you, understand that. They perceive that this is a down-to-earth guy, salt-to-the-earth guy who wants the best for the American people versus Vance, who is backed by Peter Thiel and was a venture capitalist and is working for his billionaire.
And here's the kicker. Walz isn't used to this level of attention. He's been playing in the state-level sandbox, where people tolerate some mess if you at least smile and wave. The national stage, however, is different here. Even your shoelaces get fact-checked. You can't rely on a calm tone or a dad joke about fishing season. You're under a microscope. Lindi Li made sure the lens was crystal clear. For regular people watching this unfold, the humor writes itself. Walz, the man of the people, suddenly looks like a man of the script. That's exactly how his political persona reads, now constantly retold to fit the ratings. The timing couldn't be worse. Had this exposure happened years ago, maybe Walz could have patched it up with photo ops and a well-timed op-ed about bipartisanship. But in this heated election cycle, where every move is dissected like a frog in a high school biology class, it's catastrophic. Voters aren't looking for leaders who can grow into the role. They're looking for consistency now, not later.
I mean, I'm not on anyone's payroll. I'm not beholden to anyone. That's why I'm here telling the truth. I'm not here to gaslight anybody. This is just the truth.
What is the truth?
The truth is this is just an epic disaster. This is a $1 billion disaster. Actually, it was $1.018 billion, I think, right? There were $20 million or $18 million in debt.
Right.
Lee just highlighted that Walz's consistency is about as sturdy as a paper straw in a hurricane. Social media has turned this into a full-blown meme factory, with clips of Lindy's takedowns circulating under captions like, "Walz speedrun of hypocrisy." When your brand is Midwestern nice, but your record is Midwestern chaos. The digital age doesn't just expose, it amplifies. Walz is learning the hard way that once the internet decides you're the punchline, it's nearly impossible to wrestle back control of the joke. Beyond the comedy, this exposure matters because politics today is built on trust, manufactured or genuine. It doesn't matter as long as people buy it. Walz's entire appeal hinges on that trust, the steady hand. The trustworthy neighbor vibe, and Lindy ripped the rug out from under it, showing that the trustworthy brand was less about character and more about costume. Once voters see the zipper on the back of the mascot suit, good luck convincing them it's a real bear. Walz isn't the first to face this kind of exposure. American politics is full of figures who thought their branding was bulletproof until someone pointed out the cracks. The difference here is the timing, and the player. Lindi Li doesn't just deliver criticism, she makes it entertaining.
That I have to be accountable to and to explain what happened, because I told them it was a margin of error race. I was promised, Jen O'Malley Dillon promised all of us that Harris would win. She even put videos out saying that Harris would win. I believed her, my donors believed her, and so they wrote massive checks. I feel like a lot of us were misled. And even on the night of election night, I looked somebody in the eye and I said, "Are we going to do this? Are we going to pull it off?" She told me yes. And I asked somebody else, like, "How are you feeling?" He's like, "We're going to win Iowa."
And that's lethal because in today's media ecosystem, people don't share boring critiques, they share the roasts, the sarcasm, and the clips that make them laugh while nodding in agreement. That's how narratives spread now, through entertainment disguised as accountability. Meanwhile, Walz's opponents are quietly popping champagne. In politics, the worst thing isn't being attacked by rivals. It's being exposed by someone who isn't even playing the game. That makes it look authentic, and that makes it stick. You can bet the Harris campaign is sweating. A VP pick is supposed to bring stability, not baggage. Walz was chosen to be the steady co-pilot, the one who wouldn't scare moderates or overshadow the pilot. But now, instead of steady, he looks shaky. Instead of reassuring, he looks rehearsed. And that's the last thing you want in a race where the other side is sharpening every attack ad like a medieval sword. What's fascinating is how quickly the conversation shifted. Before Lindi Li's exposure, Walz was barely on the national radar, a background character you'd Google after the VP announcement and then forget 5 minutes later.
Is the most neglected part of home ownership is the gutters. It's personal for me.
This is Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz making an appearance on the popular TikTok show Subway Takes.
Had problems with gutters before. You get your basement wet, you get ice dams, cause a lot of problems.
How often do you like looking at gutters?
I look quite often, surprisingly, because
Like
I kind
you're
of judge it.
inspecting.
I try not to be judgmental on people, but when I see a well-tended gutter, it says
He's front page news not for his policies, but for his contradictions. It's the political equivalent of being remembered not for your movie role, but for tripping on the red carpet. Memorable, yes, but not in the way you want. The more Walz tries to shrug it off, the worse it gets. Because shrugging looks like admission, smiling through it looks like pretense. And addressing it head-on only keeps the story alive. It's a lose-lose scenario. Sooner or later, someone calls you out. Walz built his brand as the authentic, steady leader. And now, Lindi has revealed just how manufactured that brand really is. It's like peeling the label off an organic product and discovering it's made in the same factory as the cheap stuff. Once people know, they can't unknow. And here's where it gets almost poetic. Walz's downfall isn't coming from a scandal, a lawsuit, or massive corruption. It's coming from the exposure of his contradictions, his branding unraveling under the weight of its own inconsistencies. It's death by 1,000 sarcastic cuts, each one amplified across social media until the image can't hold